Alright, let's dive deep into this in pure Scottish football storytelling style. The kind that feels like you're talking straight to the camera, coffee in hand, pacing around the room, because Celtic's transfer window is somehow still stuck. So here we go. It's Thursday the 7th of August, and somehow, unbelievably low, I find myself parked in the exact same chair as yesterday, facing the same questions with the same lack of answers, wondering, are Celtic actually going to sign someone, anyone? Because at this stage, it's starting to feel like we've hit pause on the summer entirely. But before we go into the black hole that is Celtic's transfer business right now, we've got to touch on what actually happened on the pitch, because there was a game last night that, let's be honest, most folk didn't see, but it could very well matter to Celtic's Champions League campaign. Kairat 1, Slovan Bratislava 0. Doesn't exactly scream European glamour, does it? But trust me, this tie is more important than it looks on paper. First leg in Kazakhstan, and from the off, Kairat were up for it. You could tell. It wasn't just the altitude, the pitch, or the travel fatigue catching up to Slovan. Kairat genuinely looked like the better team. They came flying out the blocks, carving out 3 real chances in the first 6 minutes. Honestly, they could have been 2 or 3 up before Slovan even got a foot on the ball. The Kazakhs had energy, intensity, and more importantly, purpose. Slovan looked rattled early, but to their credit, they began to settle, started knocking the ball about a bit, trying to drag the tempo down. It looked like they were going to grind their way to a 0-0 and set themselves up nicely for the second leg back home in Bratislava. But then came the big turning point midway through the second half. Raheem Ibrahim, already on a yellow, lunges in again. Second booking. Off you go. Down to 10 men. And that changed the dynamic entirely. You could feel the shift instantly. Kairat sensed the opportunity. They pushed, probed, kept throwing balls into the box, and eventually in the 90th minute, they got what they were looking for. Penalty. Now I've seen the replay a few times. It's soft. A nudge here, maybe a little shirt tug. One of those where you've seen them given, but you've also seen refs wave play on. Not much in it if we're being honest. But the referee didn't hesitate, pointed straight to the spot. And that's where this story gets interesting. Because stepping up to take the penalty wasn't some seasoned veteran or flashy foreign signing. It was a 16-year-old lad by the name of Dastan Sapayev. Now, you probably haven't heard of him. I hadn't. But here's the thing, you will. This kid's already agreed a move to Chelsea. They're bringing him in when he turns 18 for a record fee out of Kazakhstan. That tells you everything. He's viewed as a proper wonder kid, and not just locally, but across Europe. So picture the scene, 90th minute pressure moment. European qualifier on the line, and a 16-year-old steps up to take the penalty. Ice in the veins. He tucks it away like he's been doing it for years. Onenil Kairat. Absolute scenes. And it didn't stop there. Deep into stoppage time, they thought they'd double their lead. Ricardinho, who'd been a threat all game, finds the net again in the 97th minute, but it's ruled out for offside. Looked marginal, to say the least. One of those where VAR would have probably spent 5 minutes drawing lines and confusing everyone. But no VAR here. Flag goes up, goal chalked off. Meanwhile, Slovan's manager, Vladimir Weiss, a man who, funnily enough, used to be in charge of Kairat, got himself sent off from the touchline. No idea what for. Maybe dissent, maybe something he said, or maybe it was just his outfit. Because let me tell you, the combination of jeans, that jacket, and those trainers, a fashion crime, if ever I've seen one. Look, I'm not exactly a fashion guru myself. I rotate through the same 4 t-shirts every week, but even I had to draw the line there. So where does that leave us on 0 for Kairat heading into the second leg? Advantage Kazakhs. But do I think they'll go through? No. I still think Slovan Bratislava will turn it around. They've got experience, they got quality, and Kairat, despite their strong home record, do tend to fall apart when they leave the comfort of their own pitch. They've played 3 home games in this Champions League campaign and won them all without conceding. Impressive, no doubt. But on the road, totally different story. The traveling, the pressure, the away fans, it just seems to get to them. So if Celtic end up facing Kairat, I'm not losing sleep over it. Honestly, it might not be the worst thing. It's not an easy trip, sure. It's halfway across the world. But in terms of quality, I think we'd have a real opportunity to put the tie to bed at Celtic Park in the first leg. We've done it before with sides like Astana. Why not again? The travel is a bit of a nightmare. No getting around that. But the way the fixtures are laid out, it could work. We'd be away on a Tuesday most likely, with enough time to get back and recover before facing Rangers on the Sunday. And let's not pretend we've not handled worse schedules in the past. European football is always a juggling act, and this is nothing new. Now, while we wait to find out who our opponent's actually going to be, let's talk about something that's becoming painfully familiar, the transfer window. Or more accurately, the lack of movement in the transfer window. Because once again, we're sitting here refreshing feeds, checking sources, clinging to any rumor that sounds halfway believable. And still nothing. Marco Tilio's the name on everyone's lips, but for all the wrong reasons. Looks like a deal's pretty much in place to send him on loan to Rapid Vienna with an option to buy. They've wanted him for a while, dating back to when we first signed him from Melbourne City, but the hold-up now, Celtic don't want to be left short of wingers. Even though Tilio hasn't been getting minutes, didn't even make the pitch last weekend, the fear is that another injury would leave us scrambling and forced to throw in a youth player for key matches. So until a replacement is secured, Tilio's move is on ice. And look, I get it. From a squad management point of view, it makes sense. But it also highlights a bigger issue, our lack of urgency when it comes to getting business done early and decisively. Because here's the thing, in the last month we've only brought in 2 players, Shun Yamada and Simplice Jamai Pusi. That's it! After what felt like a decent start to the window, the activity has all but dried up. There's no sign of major reinforcements arriving. The winger that's supposed to replace Tilio still not announced. Other targets being tracked. No developments. It feels like we've hit a brick wall. One name that surfaced this week is Adam Obert. Slovakian international, 22 years old, plays in Italy for Cagliari. Now, depending on where you read, he's either a center back who can cover at left back or a full-fledged left back who's been mislabeled. I did a bit of digging, and honestly, it's pretty clear he's a left back. That's where he plays the bulk of his games for Cagliari. The center back stuff, mostly in the national team setup, and even then it feels like a case of making do rather than playing him in his best role. In Serie A, he's been used almost exclusively on the left, sometimes in a back 4, sometimes as a wing back in a 3-5-2, but rarely a 4-5 in the heart of defense. So if the club is genuinely after Ober, it's not to bolster the center back depth. It's to share minutes with Kieran Tierney, who, let's face it, isn't going to play every minute of every match. And that in itself is not a bad bit of business. Assuming, of course, we can actually get it over the line. But here's where the frustration creeps back in. Cagliari reportedly want around 6 million euros for him. Celtic predictably offered less. Shocker. Now we're in that familiar holding pattern where the club haggles, delays, and risks missing out altogether. We've seen this movie before, you know how it ends. Meanwhile, reports from Sardinian outlets, not just Scottish papers speculating, confirm our interest. That gives the story a bit more weight. Obert is under contract until 2029, so Cagliari have no reason to budge unless we come up with a serious offer. If we want him, we need to pay. Simple as that. But whether the board will do that or whether they'll fanny about until deadline day, that's the million-pound question. Right, so let's pick this up from where we left off. The state of Celtic's transfer activity, or more accurately, the lack thereof. Because as the days tick by, the concern among the support continues to grow. It's not just about bringing in bodies anymore. It's about bringing in the right type of player at the right time to actually make a difference. And here's where the conversation starts to get a bit more, let's say, cynical. Let's be honest, how many windows have we sat through now hearing whispers about big plans and aggressive moves, only to see everything slow to a crawl by the middle of August? It feels like a loop. You got names floated early, on some early deals done, and then silence. And now, once again, we find ourselves hoping that 1 or 2 deals can somehow materialize before we go into a crucial Champions League tie and the start of proper domestic battles. The difference is at this time there's no real noise, no genuine excitement building, just a cloud of uncertainty hanging over everything. And speaking of uncertainty, let's talk about this apparent ongoing interest in the Japanese market. The Daily Record ran a line the other day. Another potential move is still in the offing, while the club are also watching other European-based players in person. Sounds vague, doesn't it? That's because it is. But we know what that means. Japan's still on the radar. We've dipped into that market consistently over the past few years, and there's no denying we've pulled out some absolute gems. Kyogo Hatate Maeda. That first wave under Ange Postecoglou was remarkable. They came in settled instantly and became some of the most important players in the team almost overnight. But that was then. The context around the Japanese market has changed massively since those days. Back then, Celtic had a sort of head start. We had access knowledge and a manager who understood the league inside out. We weren't just signing Japanese players. We were signing the best Japanese players. That's not the case anymore. Europe has woken up to the JL League. Now top Bundesliga clubs, top French and Dutch sides, even teams from the Premier League, they're all watching that market. They've seen the success stories and they're willing to move fast and with bigger offers. The idea of Celtic being the most attractive European option for top Japanese talent is frankly outdated. We're no longer first in line, and the recent signings reflect that. When we brought in Hatate, Kyogo, and Maeda, they were all performing at elite levels in Japan. Leaders in their respective teams, full internationals, or on the cusp. They arrived with momentum and quality, and they showed it immediately. Kyogo was scoring goals before he'd even unpacked his suitcase. Hatate looked like he'd been here for years after one training session. There was no betting period. It was plug and play. Compare that to the more recent arrivals. Kobayashi hasn't made an impact. Yuki Kobayashi in particular feels like a signing that was made on potential, and now he's struggling for minutes. Shun Yamada, still an unknown quantity, hasn't had the chance to show what he can do. Then there's Hyunjun Yang and Tomoki Iwata, who have floated in and out without ever truly nailing down a spot. And let's be brutally honest, when your own manager starts talking down the signings publicly, that's not a great sign. Brendan Rodgers hasn't exactly been glowing in his praise of some of these players, and that raises all kinds of questions. Are we signing players the manager actually wants, or are we just continuing with a model from a previous regime and hoping it still works? Because that's where things get murky. There seems to be this tug-of-war going on between a recruitment department that's still operating with a long-term data-driven strategy, often with one eye on future resale value, and a manager who clearly wants players that are ready to step into the starting 11 now. Rodgers is not here for long-term projects. He's here to win. He needs results immediately. And when he looks at the bench and sees lads who are raw or not physically up to speed or who don't speak the language yet, he's not going to trust them. You can see that in the selections. You can see that in the tone of his interviews. So when we hear that we're still interested in another Japanese player, this window, I've got to ask, what's the plan? Are we going to bring someone in just to sit on the bench for 6 months? Are we hoping they develop into something next season? Or are we actually targeting someone who can walk into this Celtic team and raise the level right now? Because if it's the latter, great. But if it's the former, then what are we doing? And that brings us to another rumor that's been floating about. Clement Beck Sørensen Bischoff, a winger from Brøndby. There were whispers, a bit of Twitter chat, maybe a mention or two in the media, but nothing solid. From what I can tell, this one isn't going anywhere. At least not yet. And frankly, I'm at the point where I've got to filter these things out. Otherwise, we end up going around in circles chasing speculation instead of talking about what's actually happening. But let's not kid ourselves. What's happening right now isn't great. We've got glaring holes in the squad, left back still unresolved, winger depth thin, forward options beyond Kyogo and Ida. Not convincing. We've had injuries already and we know more will come. That's football. So why aren't we being more proactive? Why aren't we strengthening from a position of power? Champions. League money in the bank, a title to defend, and a fan base that's hungry for ambition. Look, I get the idea of sustainability. I get the importance of not throwing money around carelessly. But Celtic have always walked that fine line between doing business sensibly and doing business slowly. And too often we've landed on the wrong side of that line. We've let deals drag on, missed out on targets because we didn't match the asking price, or delayed until deadline day and ended up with options B and C, or no one at all. That's the risk we're running again now. Meanwhile, the season has already started. We've got Aberdeen on Sunday, a big game early in the season against a team that'll be right up for it. And based on what we saw last weekend, we're going to need to be much better if we want to come away with 3 points. These aren't the games to be easing into form. These are the games where a sluggish performance gets punished. And that's why the lack of signings feels so frustrating, because we're not building momentum. We're stalling, even the stuff that is progressing, like the Telio deal, highlights the cracks in the wider strategy. You've got a player who clearly isn't part of the manager's plans, a lone move lined up, and we still can't pull the trigger because there's no one coming in to replace him. We're basically being held hostage by our own depth chart. And that's not how a club at this level should be operating. Now, if you're the optimistic type, and I do try occasionally, you could say this is just a calm before the storm, that we've got a few deals in the pipeline, maybe even close to being finalized, that the club's just being cautious, waiting for the right time to announce things. But if that's true, then we're running out of time to reap the benefits, because every day we wait, we lose preparation. Players need time to settle. They need to get up to speed, learn the system, integrate with the squad. Signing someone on August 30th and expecting them to make an impact in September is a gamble, and one we've seen backfire plenty of times before. And that's where I come back to Brendan Rodgers, because whatever you think of the man, and opinions are mixed, let's be honest, there's no question he wants control. He wants players he trusts, and he wants clarity. So if we're not delivering that, if we're still pushing signings that don't match what he needs, then we're setting ourselves up for internal tension. We've seen this story before, and we know how it ends. So here we are, early August. Transfer window still open. Questions still unanswered. And all we can do is wait and hope that the right players come in, that we don't lose key targets to dithering, and that when the Champions League rolls around, we're not left looking at the squad list thinking what could have been. And I know how this sounds. I don't want to come on here every day and just moan. I'd much rather be talking about new signings, exciting young players coming in a team that's clearly improving and evolving. That's the dream. But at the moment, it just feels like we're stuck. Like we're watching the same window play out again and again, hoping for a different outcome. And unless something changes, unless the board steps up, unless the manager gets the players he needs, I worry that we're going to look back on this summer as another missed opportunity. Before we proceed, subscribe to our channel and enable notifications to receive all exclusive news about Celtic FC. Don't miss any details about your favorite team. It's extremely important for Celtic FC fans. The air around Celtic Park is thick with speculation this week as murmurs swirl regarding a potential rift within the squad. Brendan Rodgers, the seasoned manager who returned to the helm with ambitions of restoring dominance in Scottish football, is reportedly urging the club's board to facilitate the departure of midfielder David Turnbull. Sources close to the training ground whisper that Rodgers has grown increasingly frustrated with Turnbull's attitude and influence behind closed doors. While no official statement has been released, insiders claim Rodgers allegedly told senior staff that the player is poisoning the group, a bold and scathing declaration that suggests more than a tactical disagreement. Observers have noted Turnbull's absence from key moments in recent fixtures, sparking questions that now seem to have an ominous explanation. These rumors, if true, mark a significant twist in what was once seen as a promising relationship between player and coach. Turnbull, hailed as a creative force during his initial years at Celtic, has seen his form fluctuate, but few could have predicted such damning words. If Rodgers truly believes that Turnbull's presence is undermining the unity of the squad, the fallout could redefine the team's approach to discipline and internal culture moving forward. It's worth noting that Rodgers has always valued harmony and commitment within his squads, often preferring unity over sheer talent when push comes to shove. This alleged stance on Turnbull, however, introduces a far more personal dimension. The language reported that Turnbull is poisoning the group goes beyond standard criticism. It hints at a deeper discontent, possibly related to behind-the-scenes dynamics that the public rarely sees. Players have been observed engaging less with Turnbull in training, though such behavior might be chalked up to coincidence under different circumstances. Now, however, those signs are being reinterpreted in the context of a dressing room potentially at odds. The idea that one player could disrupt the delicate balance of morale and teamwork is not new in football, but rarely is the assertion so direct or damning. Rodgers' alleged call for Turnbull's exit suggests an urgent need to restore cohesion before it jeopardizes Celtic's ambitions both domestically and in Europe. Whether this will prompt a swift sale or an awkward stalemate remains to be seen. But one thing is certain, this isn't the type of distraction Rodgers would tolerate for long. The manager's history shows he doesn't bluff. Adding further intrigue is Turnbull's contract situation. The midfielder's current deal is set to expire at the end of the season, and with no extension announced, the timing of these rumors seems less than coincidental. Could Rodgers be using this moment to hasten a departure, removing a player he sees as detrimental without the club having to pay a premium? Alternatively, could Turnbull himself be pushing for an exit, and this supposed statement from Rodgers is more a response than a preemptive move? Those close to the player describe him as passionate and intense, someone who never shies from expressing frustration when things go awry on the pitch. But has that passion crossed the line if Turnbull is indeed clashing with teammates or challenging the authority of the coaching staff? The consequences could be irreversible. Yet until official word comes from the club, supporters are left piecing together the puzzle. Some fans have already taken to forums and social media to speculate, debating whether Turnbull's exclusion from recent starting 11s has been performance-related or disciplinary. In a team fighting on multiple fronts, such unrest, real or perceived, could have ripple effects far beyond the training pitch. From a broader perspective, this situation has reignited conversations around Brendan Rodgers' man management style. Known for his meticulous attention to detail and emotional intelligence, Rodgers rarely airs grievances in public. That's what makes the alleged comment about Turnbull so stark. If he indeed told his staff that the midfielder is poisoning the group, it signals an uncharacteristic moment of candor or perhaps desperation. Critics may argue that such language risks alienating not just Turnbull, but other players who could feel similarly scrutinized. On the other hand, Rodgers might be sending a calculated message. No individual is bigger than the collective. In a season already brimming with expectations and pressure, establishing clear lines of authority might be necessary to maintain focus. Still, one must wonder whether this reported friction is the tip of a larger iceberg within Celtic's squad. Are there other players echoing Turnbull's sentiment behind closed doors? Or is this a case of one bad apple threatening to spoil the bunch? If Rodgers does manage to navigate this without letting the locker room fracture further, it will be yet another testament to his leadership. But it's a high-stakes gamble nonetheless. While fans continue to speculate and the club remains officially silent, the clock is ticking. The transfer window may still have time, but decisions must be made swiftly if Celtic hope to avoid a prolonged distraction. Turnbull's potential suitors, rumored to include clubs in England's Championship, and even lower-tier Premier League sides, will be watching developments closely. A player of his technical ability doesn't become unwanted overnight, which makes Rodgers' reported stance all the more striking. If the midfielder is sold or loaned out in the coming weeks, it will validate the speculation that something deeper is amiss. However, should he remain, the challenge will be reintegration, or worse, managing a silent standoff. In either scenario, the integrity of the dressing room hangs in the balance. Celtic's campaign could be defined by how this tension is resolved. Supporters, analysts, and rivals alike are waiting for any signal from Parkhead, yet the quiet only fuels the fire. Is this a calculated internal purge, or a last-ditch effort to maintain order? Only time, and perhaps a leaked dressing room photo or cryptic interview, will tell. Until then, the rumors grow louder, and so too does the sense that something big is coming. Hello, fan. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, as it means a lot to Celtic FC. Also, share your opinion about the news in the comments below. See you in the next video.